Painting miniatures with anything other than acrylics is one of those parts of the hobby that can look complicated and feel somewhat intimidating, until you realise it's all about letting go. Oils and pigments tend to scare people because they feel messy. They don't behave like acrylics, and as a result, people find them less accessible. I think a lot of hobbyists feel like it's better to stick with what they know and remain in their comfort zone and take less risk, when really oils and pigments are the safest and most freeing products that you could possibly ever use on miniatures. Oil paint isn't bad voodoo, it's just pigment held together with oil instead of water. That's it. The important part is that it dries slowly, painfully slowly by hobby standards. That slowness gives you time. Time to push it around, time to soften it, time to wipe most of it away, and even start again. Oils let you change your mind. I don't use oils to be Mr. Arty-Farty Pants. I use them to suggest history, stains, shadows, wear and tear, movement, and realism. And if it doesn't look right, I can always start again before it even dries. That is an empowering feeling. Then we have pigments. Pigment powders are even simpler. They're basically just the colour pigment with no binder, no oil, no water, just finely ground coloured dust. They work because they already look like the thing you're trying to fake: dirt, soot, rust, and ash. You don't paint pigments, you place them, and then decide how much you actually want to keep. If it feels subtle, uneven, even a bit accidental, then you're on the right track. This is why oils and pigments specifically suit my less is more approach so well. They reward restraint, they forgive hesitation, and they let you stop early. I'm not here to show you every technique. I just want to show you how I use these tools quickly, loosely, and get awesome, effective results with minimal effort and absolutely no overthinking. Of all the ways that you can use oil paints, we're going to start off today with an oil wash. How to make a basic oil wash using some of the oils that I've got here. Now, this is a really simple way to add rich depth, dirt, filth, and buildups of grime on your miniatures. This looks fantastic. It has a great matte finish, and I tend to use oils in every single paint job I do. Now, you don't need the most expensive artist oil paints. All I have here are these 4 colors at the moment. In fact, these are the only 4 in my entire hobby drawer at the moment. What I have here is a burnt umber, which I think is absolutely essential if you're going to be doing oil washes, specifically if you're going to be doing Grimdark stuff. Also, I've got a black. Doesn't really matter which type of black you've got here. The next one, though, is a Payne's Grey. Now, this one I learned from Cult of Paint, and I've been using this quite a lot for sort of colder colors, generally speaking. And the last one, and I use this quite a lot, is a nice, bright, vivid orange for some rust effects. The first 2 are the most important, though. We're going to be combining black and brown to make different types of washes depending on the ratio between the 2. Sometimes you can go fully black or fully brown. It depends what you want to do here. I'm just going to show you how you make and go about making an oil wash. Now, you see a lot of people commenting about whether you should varnish your miniatures before using oils and enamels. Generally speaking, yes, you probably should, and you're going to go with more of a satin or even a gloss varnish, because what this does is it lets the oil go into the recesses of the miniature a little bit better. It bleeds into the recesses better. Now, I don't always do this. It depends how much staining you want on your miniature. So bear this in mind. If you are wanting your miniature to be discolored more, don't use a varnish. Just be very, very careful how you apply your oils and how you take them away in the sort of reductive process that I'll show you as well. But if you do not want the sort of color underneath to be tarnished too much, then absolutely use a gloss varnish before you apply any oils or enamels. Let's start off with some Payne's Grey here. I've got some white armor on a World Eater, and what I want to do is do a recess oil wash with some Payne's Grey. This is a cold grey color. It's fairly subtle. It's not too stark. I'm just going to be using this to make my white armor pop a little bit more. Now, the way that you go about making an oil wash is you put some of the oil into your little pot or receptacle, and then we're going to mix that with some mineral spirits. Now, there are different types of mineral spirits. You can use straight up white spirit, but in this case, I like to use odorless mineral spirits because it doesn't make your house stink so much or give you too much of a headache. Oil paints go an incredibly far distance. I've had these 4 little oil paints here for probably a couple of years, and I only ever use a tiny bit at a time. These will last you an absolute lifetime if you treat them well. So it's dead easy. All we're going to do is apply some of the oil straight out of the tube And then depending on how thick we want our oil wash to be, we add our odorless mineral spirits. Now, if you want a very watery, subtle recess wash, which is what I'm doing here, I will add more of the mineral spirits to water it down further. If I wanted a very thick, dirty wash, say for doing a bit more patina or rust or dirt and filth on something, I might add less of the mineral spirits and less of a diluted mixture. Now we need to mix these two things together. We have the oil and we have the mineral spirit in the pot together. We're going to get a dirty old brush and we're going to mix this until it is a smooth consistency with no lumps and bumps in there. This can be quite hard to see if you're using a very dark color, but just be really, really thorough because you don't want any chunks of oil in this mixture. Using the same brush, once we've got the mixture nice and smooth, we start applying it all over the model. Now you can do this in different ways. You can use a smaller brush and use a sort of dabbing motion to get a sort of pin wash. What we're doing here though is a very subtle all over wash, and I'm going to use some reduction sort of techniques here to show you how to get rid of the wash that's on the surface of the raised areas outside of the recesses. Rather than using the paintbrush with strokes here, I'm actually just dabbing the model very carefully so that I don't damage the paint underneath. In this case, I have not varnished this model. You'll see the oil wash flows into all of the recesses very, very nicely indeed. And it doesn't take much effort to get that done, just a few seconds to get the entire model coated in our oil wash. The next thing I'll do is get some cotton buds. You can use makeup sponges or paper towel, but I would suggest the cotton buds are quite good for a slightly more precise detail here. The problem with this is that they do tend to leave a little bit of fluff on the model, which you'll have to remove with a pair of tweezers later, generally, depending on how heavy-handed you are. What we're going to do here is just slowly sort of roll and dab the cotton bud all over the miniature to get rid of any excess buildup of oil wash, specifically on the raised areas and surfaces. What this does is it allows the oil wash to go into the recesses, and while it's drying, we can remove any of the excess. Now, if you've done a thicker wash, a thicker, darker wash, which perhaps does sort of tarnish the color underneath, you'll need to use mineral spirits on the end of your cotton bud to be able to remove that fully. Otherwise, just dabbing it like this is just going to spread it around. In this case, I want it to look messy, I want it to look dirty, so I'm not using any mineral spirits on the end of my cotton bud. So with that very subtle grey recess wash done here, I'm now going to show you how I do a really filthy, dirty overcoat of just grime and build up here. So with this wash, you'll notice it is an awful lot thicker. I have added less of the mineral spirits and I have done a direct 50-50 of the burnt umber and the black here, a little dot of each and less of the mineral spirits. I'm going to apply this all over the model and add some real dirt and weathering to this miniature. Because of the incredibly slow drying time of oils, we have so much freedom to play around with things, up to 24 hours often before the oils actually cure. And again, you can use odorless mineral spirits or other mineral spirits to keep on reactivating the oils and playing around with it to your heart's content. This is why I love using oils so much, because they are very, very freeing when it comes to painting in this way. Our bright, pristine white armor is now fully chaosified. And this World Eater looks like he's actually come from a war zone. That is really it for oil washes. Very, very simple process, easy to remove, easy to play around with, adds an awful lot of rich depth, grime and filth and ambience to your models as well. I highly, highly recommend that you get yourself some oils and have a play with them, because you really can't mess it up. Now let's have a look at another few techniques. Okay, so I've got a Necromunda door here. Now what I did with this door is I sprayed it with a silver paint over black, and then I gave it a very, very rough oil wash, probably about a year ago now, and let that dry a long, long time ago. So it's just got a slightly sort of tarnished finish to it. It hasn't got a full-on deep sort of rich dirty vibe. What we're going to do now though is create some rust, patina and dirt build up on this using some oils, and also showing you how I might use pigments in combination with these oils to create some really, really nice effects. So what we've got here is 3 of my oils dotted onto some paper towel. We've got some orange for some high sort of bright rust, with some black and some more burnt umber here as well for some dirt and filth. What I'm going to do is actually dot these around onto the door, just small dots of each color in a very random fashion. If you plan this out and it looks too uniform, it will look rubbish. Do it in a chaotic, artistic manner and things will look a lot better. We're going to dot these around the door in areas that I feel just completely random, basically. Now, I reiterate, you are going to want to put paper towel down. You do not want oil stains on your nice wooden table. There we are. We've added some dots of oil onto the door. The next process, though, is to get out our odorless mineral spirits and blend all of this together. I want to create natural, realistic looking build-ups of rust, dirt, and grime here. So adding a little bit of mineral spirits onto my brush, starting at the top, I am spreading, mushing, blending, and creating some really nice effects here just by dabbing those pieces of oil, those dots of oil into the miniature. And again, I could spend ages on this, but honestly, overthinking it and overworking it is usually where it starts to look a bit rubbish. Less is more. Now you can already see while this is still wet that things are starting to look very interesting. We have some nice blending of these three colors together and it's really, really easy to achieve. I went and had a cup of tea, had a snack, came back, things are still wet and things are still pliable. So I can go back in now, tweak things if I really need to, but honestly, things are looking pretty good with the patina and weathering on this door. Now you could go a lot further with this, you could add lots of different colors if you want, but honestly, I like simple and effective, rusty, dusty, dirty stuff like this is my bag. If you want to do a hell of a lot of scenery, if you want to pump out maybe, I don't know, 20 of these doors, this is a really quick and great way to do it and things look great on the table. Now let's try something else. We're going to use pigments here. Now I've got 4 pigments in front of me here and I tend to use more different colors of pigments than I do with oils, and they are a completely different thing, of course. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, pigments have no binder. They are literally just colored dust. These things are messy as well, so make sure you put down a nice bit of paper towel and you don't inhale any of this because it's not too good for your lungs, I believe. What I've got here though, and what I tend to use quite often, is a yellow, a bright, vivid sort of rusty orange, a mid-orange, a sort of orangey brown, darker version, and also a black as well for sort of soot and stuff. I love the black actually. It's only been recently that I started using black pigments. I also do occasionally use a white pigment, but you've got to be very careful with that because it is so bright and vivid. Now the way that you use pigments is really, really simple, even more simple than oil. We don't have any carrier for the pigments, they are just colored dust. So the way that we apply them is to take a dirty old brush and just stipple and dab and mush the pigments into the areas that you want. Now in this case, I actually have a fairly still wet oiled door, so this might interact slightly differently and I am all for it. I don't really care how this ends up, it's just a door, and I know that things are safe with oil paints because I can always just wipe them off again. The pigments are pretty much the same really. You can add water or mineral spirits to further dilute them on the surface of your miniature and play around with them a little bit more as well. So in a similar way as I did with my oil dots, I'm going to start adding dots and areas of different colored pigments here as well. Just placing them into the areas that I feel they should be, particularly with the darker colors at the bottom, the sooty sort of areas, and some more oranges to expand on the orange from the oil. Now let's see what happens if we add some more fluid, in this case the odorless mineral spirit, back onto the oil and the pigment together and reactivate everything to see how we can mix it all together. Honestly, this is further than I would normally go. I think things are looking pretty good, and again, I don't want to overcook it, so we're going to leave it here. There we have it. A pretty good looking door really, and very, very little effort indeed. Anyone could do this, and if you haven't used oils or pigments before, then just look at how easy it is to achieve a nice, rusty, dirty, filthy looking Grimdark effect. Now I realized when I was doing this video that I only did one side of the door, of course, so I thought for an extra bonus effect I'd show you how I go about doing some splattered sort of blood effects on things. Now, Blood for the Blood God, a Citadel paint, is a fantastic paint in its own right, but if you combine this with an element of the oil paints that we were using earlier, in this case the odorless mineral spirits, what you get is a really interesting effect. If I dab some of the mineral spirits onto this door here, the water-based product that is Blood for the Blood God does not mix with the odorless mineral spirits. So what we get is a very random splashing effect that looks really, really cool on your miniatures. Watch what happens when I add Blood for the Blood God on top of some mineral spirits now. All it takes is pushing it around a little bit with a brush and we get some really cool splattered effects. Now I could go a bit more on this and add some darker colors to it to make it look even more gory, but at this point things are looking pretty cool, again with very minimal effort. And there we have it, our finished door after very, very little effort indeed. And again, I reiterate, these things are not scary. Products like oils and pigments are super easy to use and incredibly forgiving as well. The longer you paint, the more you realize that it's not about doing more, it's about knowing when to stop. Oils and pigments are perfect for that. They let you push, pull, smear and wipe, to experiment, to suggest, to let the miniature tell its own story. You don't have to control every detail, you don't have to worry about messing it up, because really you can't. Sometimes the best effects happen when you let go, when you let the paint, the pigment and your instinct guide you. Painting like this isn't about perfection, it's about freedom. Free yourself, because often less is more.